Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and welcome to episode 150 of the I Heart Movies podcast. I can't believe I hit a milestone and was actually able to plan for it. Sort of. Last month, when I hit the 200 total podcast episodes milestone, I quickly re-recorded my intro so I could acknowledge it, but with this one I figured out at that time that I was hitting the 150 episodes of this podcast, so I changed my plans to properly celebrate it, and then I forgot to actually talk about it during the podcast anyway. For this episode, I'd already planned to do Gremlins with Dan from TYTD Reviews, but when I realized that this was a big milestone, I decided to switch things up and also have Nicki from Trivial Theater join us. Nicki is the person who connected me and Dan in the first place, and they're already friends, so I thought it'd be fun to have them both. And I was right. Too right. We ended up talking for 3.5 hours, periodically about Gremlins, but this was one of the most rabbit-trailed podcasts I have ever recorded. Anyway, in addition to this being episode 150, it also marks the start of the holiday season and the beginning of what I guess will now be a new series, the Christmas Movie Marathon. I've done Christmas movies for years, but I thought it'd be fun to tie everything together under one cohesive banner. Okay, I think that's enough from me. Let's now hear from Nicki and Dan as we talk all about Joe Dante and Steven Spielberg's Christmas horror comedy classic, Gremlins.
We talked a little bit about how this was a kids movie and how it was a PG-rated thing, but it came out like a month before they brought out the PG-13 rating, which I thought was super interesting.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how much of an uproar there was, but I heard that there were parents that were very mad that they had no idea what this movie was.
Well, back in the day, obviously. Well, yeah. Well, and back in the day, obviously, you had, newspaper reviews, but, if it's a PG movie, I'm sure parents probably like, whatever.
If it were me, because I have seen some PG-rated movies from back at that time, if it were me, I would still check the movie.
Oh, yeah. No, agreed. But it would be interesting to see what
There's some weird things that got into PG-13 or PG movies back then.
No, you're certainly not wrong. And, I mean, depending upon how they did the trailer would be an interesting thing to look at, too.
As far as I know, there was never a trailer that really featured what the Gremlins were. They mostly showed the main Mogwai, Gizmo. They showed him off and made it seem kind of cute. I don't think that they really led on to what the movie was going to turn into.
I mean,
so I can see people being tricked by the trailer.
Oh, yeah. Seeing a gremlin, be microwaved to death and explode. I don't see an issue with that.
Yeah, sure, it depends on the kid. It depends on the kid.
Oh, no, 100%.
I don't know that would have bothered me, but I think that the fate of the main villain at the end might have bothered me.
The one that got me was the one where the gremlin went into the blender.
Yes,
because that is literally shot for shot straight out of Peter Jackson's Brain Damage, basically. Complete with the amount of gore as well. It's just like almost an equal shot for shot remake, and I'm sitting there going, "This was PG-13. Okay, fair enough. Each their own."
Or PG.
Because this is the thing, like over here in the UK at least, when Gremlins got here, because Gremlins and Ghostbusters were released on the same day, and both of them came over at the same time for classification here. And in the UK, we at the time only had U, which is universal. That means there's nothing wrong with it. PG, which was kind of reserved for your 8 to 10-year-olds. And then it jumped straight to 15. And whereas in America, they kind of went, okay, well, these films are a bit different and we should probably introduce a kind of middle ground. In the UK, we had none of that. We just went, yep, that's a 15. Boom. And it just instantly wiped out like any kind of link to the target audience that this film could have had. That sort of 12 to 14-year-old crowd what this film is kind of aimed at. It was just completely written off. The UK was having none of that nonsense. We didn't introduce 12A, I don't think, until probably the early mid-2000s, and even then it was kind of very loosely applied. 12A is basically anybody aged 12 or under can see the film if an adult's with them. But yeah, basically the way that our certification works, I really don't know if it works the same way in the US, but over here it's a case of whatever the rating is, you can send kids to go and see it as long as an adult's with them. But once you get past a certain point, like the 15 and 18s, even if an adult says, oh, yeah, they're with me, that's fine, they can't go in.
Okay.
So, yeah, so like...
That's more strict than here, I believe.
Yeah. So, like, if there's a 15 and you've got a kid with you, they'll say, well, you can go and see it, but the kid can't. And they just won't let you in at all. So,
as far as I know, I'm not 100% sure about PG-13, but kids can go to anything as long as a parent is with them. Like, I think even R-rated movies.
Oh, yeah. There was actually a big thing back when Deadpool, the original Deadpool movie came out, because you got these parents that said, oh, yeah, it's a superhero movie. And even though they said, okay, this is a hard R-rated movie, do not bring your kids. Oh, my kids can take it. It doesn't matter what you think. There is a lot going on. I mean, all aspects, gore, sexual, whole 9 yards. And there was a lot of parents that got up in arms about it. And it's like, what else can you do?
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds himself came on and said, hey, rated R movie, hard R. Listen.
Some parents are just...
Well, they're the my kid can handle it. He's mature for his age.
What do you mean I can't take him to see Driller Killer? That's what I paid my ticket stub for. So, Gremlins.
Yes.
Yes.
Crazy.
In the UK, yeah, they basically said no, which meant that it didn't do very well in cinemas, but it did all right on video because the laws in the UK are a bit weird around, well, were a bit weird. They don't really apply now, but we're a bit weird around video shops. So, as I mentioned, in cinemas, if the rating was older than your kid, you couldn't take the kid to see the film. Mm-hmm. But for home rental markets, if you rented the movie and the seller had no reason to believe you were renting the movie for the kid, you could rent whatever you wanted. So if you wanted to show the kid Cannibal Holocaust or Driller Killer or Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, whatever, you could go into the shop, and as long as you could kind of blag that you weren't renting it for your 8-year-old kid, you could rent it and just take it home and let little Billy watch whatever he wanted. So that's where Gremlins kind of took off over here. Same with Ghostbusters. It did okay in the cinemas, but it was the home video market that really blew it up because they didn't have to deal with the restrictions anymore, so they could just take it out for the kids to watch whenever.
I wonder how much better British children fared than American children as far as being scared by it. If the reports online are to be believed, it scarred so many children, but I don't know how true that is or how much of that is hyperbole.
I remember and it's one of those things, it sticks out as a memory because I got made fun of for it. But I think one thing about being an 80s kid was you moved really close to the TV just because you did. And I think the go-to joke is that most 80s kids sat 18 to 24 inches away from the screen. But I remember being very close to the screen and there was a jump scare with one of the Gremlins. And I ran out of the room screaming. And my dad was sitting there watching the movie and laughing at me. And he's like, that's what you get for sitting too close.
Yeah, well, I remember sitting close to the TV and everyone told me it was going to ruin my eyes.
Yep.
And I mean, I have terrible eyesight now, so maybe they were right. Who knows?
Well, same. Very much same. But
my grandma had one of those big box wooden TVs that sat on the floor.
Oh, the console TVs, yeah.
I kind of want one of those.
Same.
I'm not sure, but there is a possibility it's still on our property somewhere out in a shed collecting dirt and animal hair and droppings and whatever else. It could still exist around here somewhere, but I don't know if I'd be able to turn it on.
Yeah, a bit of compressed air. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Just dust it off. It's still good.
Polish. Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, a lot of those. Exactly. Yeah. You'd probably want to replace the screen at this point anyway, because the wires have probably been chewed beyond recognition.
Turn it on and it just pops and spreads glass all over the room.
And I'll tell you, like that kind of a glass, it's insane how thick it is. Like it's almost an inch thick in most cases, like on those old tube TVs.
So Gremlins, 1980. Is it a bad time to say I've never watched Gremlins before a couple of days ago?
Really?
This was my first time.
Huh. Okay. I would have thought this had been something you watched like as a kid.
No, it was. So Gremlins has always been for me one of those films that's kind of right place, wrong time. I've always appreciated what it's tried to do, but whenever it's been on, it's always been on at Christmas in the UK. whenever it's been on, I've always either been incredibly busy and just haven't had time to properly sort of watch it, or I've caught it like 2/3 of the way through. Like, I've always seen when the Gremlins are sort of attacking the town, but all of the kind of opening first half an hour or so, I've always missed it. So I've never actually sat down and consciously said, I'm going to watch Gremlins from start to finish, until you very kindly asked me onto the show a while back, which made me finally sort of pull my socks up. And I think it was 2 or 3 nights ago, I put it on and made some notes and sort of worked my way through it. And you know what? You know, it was nice to be able to finally cross this one off my list, because you know it's one that, like you say, you'd have thought somebody like me would have seen it years ago and just had it part of the sort of traditional roster of Christmas films I watch. But yeah. Weirdly, I've seen Gremlins 2 more than I've seen Gremlins. That one, for some reason, I always manage to catch just as it's starting. I've actually seen Gremlins 2 pretty much start to finish. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but I've actually watched that one. But the original, was always one that just eluded me a little bit.
I think Gremlins 2, I think I saw that before I saw Gremlins, because I remember the Gremlins attacking like a cooking show. Wasn't that like inside there was like a tower?
Yeah, that was in number 2.
Yeah, so I saw that probably, I don't think I was even a teenager. I remember seeing that just on TV, because there would be a channel that on Saturdays would just play random movies. So I saw that then, and I didn't know what I was watching, but it made an impression on me. I was like, that I kind of liked that, but it was also kind of scary, but I still thought about it every once in a while. And then I later figured out what it was, and I borrowed Gremlins from the library. I think that was when I was a teenager, maybe 13 or 14. And they didn't have Gremlins 2. So I have not seen Gremlins 2 since I was a kid.
I just actually watched it like after watching the original Gremlins, because they were both on Peacock. And it's an experience.
Doesn't the film have Hulk Hogan turn up randomly?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he randomly pops up. He's like that weird kind of, what are you doing here kind of a guy. Like, it becomes self-aware about halfway through. And it gets weird quick, but it's funny weird. It's like that 80s weird.
Mm-hmm.
Early 90s weird. 80s weird works for me. I'm good with that.
I don't know much about Hulk Hogan, except he also, I'm assuming he did something similar in Muppets from Space, because I remember him in Muppets from Space.
I mean, he was kind of the guy, like if you were into wrestling, like obviously he was the guy. So I think he probably was, I don't even know who you'd relate it to. I suppose like not that the two aren't synonymous, but like a Stan Lee level cameo. Like, okay, this is a movie in the 80s. Where is Hulk Hogan going to show up? So, Gremlins.
Gremlins. In the UK, I had a 15 certificates. It came out the same day as Ghostbusters. You guys, you made a certificate for it, but not us. Us in the UK, we just stamped it as a 15 and told the kids to go home.
And after the film's release, Joe Dante says, I still have no idea why this picture was successful.
And you know what? I'm inclined to agree with him. It was one of those moments watching this film where the tonal clash between it being effectively just a good old-fashioned family Christmas film and, you know, the offcuts of an early Peter Jackson film were so starkly combined that as I was sitting through it, I was going, well, I know why I like this film, but I don't know how anybody else. You know? How did this do well, but Robot in the Family or Suburban Commando didn't? You know, I came out the other end of it going, well, this was an absolute tonal car crash, but I loved every minute of it.
Well, did those other movies have a cute singing animal that children could fall in love with?
You know what?
I mean, Gizmo was a cute singing animal, really.
That's what I mean. That's why this one did well, and whatever the Suburban Commando and whatever the other one you said was, maybe that's why this didn't do well.
I think it was the gremlin in the microwave
that sold it. So this is the thing. I usually find little furry cute things in movies very annoying. Like, I'm not a big fan of things like the Ewoks or stuff like that. But there's something about the Gremlins, and I don't know what it is, but every time they were on screen, my heart melted like I'd just seen a kitten. It was just full-blown, like, "Ah, look at him! That's beautiful!" And especially the bit where they're all playing little instruments by the Christmas trees. Just melted my heart. It made me feel sick. I was so happy.
You liked this because the creatures reminded you of things, didn't they?
A little bit. There was a little bit of the Gillis in there somewhere, just creeping about. I think they handled the bad gremlin puppets very well in this. I think the good ones don't get as much a time to shine, but in many ways, I think that.
Well, there's only one good one, really.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well,
the cute little fluffy ones,
The thing that makes these movies interesting is the shenanigans.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're talking a kid audience or, someone that's just sadistic like Dan, you're going to, the gremlins, poor Gizmo. I mean, that poor little guy had to have gone through so much therapy after this was all said and done. I mean, he gets put on a freaking dartboard and,
yeah. You just reminded me of the bit where I went, oh no! They got little Gizmo on the dartboard and they're sort of spinning him around and throwing darts at him. And I was like, oh, poor baby.
He was like the 8-year-old getting beat up by middle schoolers.
Oh yeah, and that face! Oh my god! When he first gets his head bumped, when he's first taken up to the bedroom, he bumps his head and he's got that little pouty face. I'm like, oh, they did a great job.
Yeah, there was something about him that was it wasn't normal cute, trying too hard to be cute. It was just I can't really even explain why he was cute. He just was cute in a really interesting, unique way, and I really liked that about him.
Absolutely.
I also learned that I can do the Gizmo voice pretty easily.
Ooh.
I'm sitting there going,
do you know who did the Gizmo voice? I had no idea until I looked it up. Howie Mandel.
Yeah.
I was, my jaw dropped. I was like, Howie Mandel?
Well, he also played the monster in Monster Squad, yeah? Or Monster Squad.
Well, he used to do a lot of voices, and I guess I knew that, but it never even crossed my mind that he would have done something like this, because I think he did. What was he the voice of Animal and Muppet Babies? I think
so.
He did several Muppet Babies. He did other cartoons around that time, and that's probably how he got this job. But I had no idea that it was Howie Mandel. That was an interesting discovery, but I can hear it now.
Oh yeah.
No, absolutely. And
then Frank Welker was, I'm going to guess all the other ones, but it's Stripe in particular is Frank Welker. He's veteran voice actor. He does all sorts of creature noises.
Oh, he does Scooby-Doo and anything Hanna-Barbera from that era. I mean, I think he still does Scooby-Doo stuff to this day, I think, as far as an animated thing.
I think he usually is the voice of Fred also.
I think so, yeah.
I don't think he's in the most recent ones. I think that's one of the things that diehard Scooby-Doo fans are upset about, was that they got rid of him. But I think in most of the regular kids ones, he still does Fred and other voices. I think he does Scooby-Doo also.
I think you're right. He at least, because I remember seeing him credited for Fred. I don't remember if I remember seeing him credited for Scooby.
But he does all sorts of animal noises and noises where animals are supposed to be talking. So he's perfect for something like this.
Oh yeah, very much. I mean, it's kind of like the Batman thing where it was different people played Batman as far as the voice of, but get like Kevin Conroy, and he's kind of the definitive.
Yes.
I also love that Chris Columbus, you think Chris Columbus, you think Home Alone, and you think, the first Harry Potter movies, and then you get this one, and he wrote the script for it, and it's holy crap.
This is the thing as well, looking into that. It wasn't just that he wrote this one, it's that he also pretty much wrote every other sort of Gremlins-based spin-off thing that happened between then and now.
Did he do Gremlins?
So he did a Gremlins video game. There was a Gremlins short film that got made that he wrote. There's a mini series thing that's coming out next year that he's been involved in writing, and it's just I think everything apart from Gremlins 2.
Wow.
he's pretty much been at the helm on it, which I thought was odd. 17 writing credits. He wrote he did write Gremlins 2, sorry. He wrote the Goonies, Gremlins 2, Young Sherlock Holmes, and weirdly he did the Christmas Chronicles 2, but not the original Christmas Chronicles.
Well, you have to improve upon the original.
They were like, who wrote the original Christmas Chronicles? I don't know. Let's just get someone in for the sequel. Chris Columbus, are you free? Yeah, sure. Okay, bashed out. Job done.
Gremlins must just be like his passion project or something. Unless they're just paying him a lot of money to keep coming back to do more.
Very possibly.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it blew my mind because I knew Spielberg was involved to some capacity, but it blew my mind just how much creative control he gave to Joe Dante to make this film. Like, he did interviews previously where he basically was like, there was a lot of stuff in Gremlins that I really didn't like, but, it was Joe's movie, so I just let him do it. And it turned out the way it did, which, I would have loved to have been, 1984 era Steven Spielberg hot off E.T., coming into the rushes for Gremlins and just being like, oh no. Oh no. Okay, well, I guess Dante knows what he's doing, but I'm not doing the press junket for this one anymore.
Well, you have to appreciate when somebody doesn't get into too much executive meddling, because that could ruin so many projects.
Oh, yeah, definitely so. And it's, you think about the things that made this work. And I mean, truly, with this, had they taken, one different turn, who's to say this wouldn't have turned out? Because it is a very unique movie for the time, I think.
I mean, it could have just been any other generic creature movie.
Right.
But this one, it has staying power because of the characters, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Gizmo is so cute and lovable and memorable, and then the Gremlins themselves too. Even though they're hideous, they have a charm about them.
And they balance the dark really well. Like they didn't, because, you think about, and not that they would have taken it that far, but you think of horror movies at the time. I mean, it would have been nothing to kill off the dog or to, increase the violence in a different way. Or, they hit that balance of, I guess,
the violence was like Looney Tunes violence.
It was.
Instead of graphic violence.
And that might have been the 80s too, because there is a lot of that, that kind of cartoony-esque type of violence in like non-animated type stuff,
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons that I liked this and was not at all turned off by it was how it was like a cartoon almost, like a live action cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
And like, if something gets too violent, too graphic, then I kind of check out. I'm not really into that. But I like that they kind of held back and they played it funny. Even though there was serious things happening, they really did balance it very well.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the ones that jumps to my mind is the plot arc of Mrs. Deagle.
Oh, yes. God. I was just going to bring that up, like how she... Go ahead.
So I was going to say, she sort of starts off as this very irascible, almost Mr. Magoo style, she has a point, but she's a little bit confused, but she knows what she wants and she's very aggressive about getting it. And as the film progresses, they just slowly more and more turn her into a cartoon until by the end of the film, they like full on launch her out of the top floor of her house on a stair machine.
I thought of her as like a gender swapped Scrooge, because you had the scene with her telling the poor mother that she's not going to give her any leniency if she can't pay her rent on time, even though she's not getting paid for another 2 weeks. And at that point I was like, well, I know this movie is kind of a horror movie, so Mrs. Deagle's going to die.
Well, and all of her cats were named
I love that.
Drachma. Oh, they're all named for money, like Drachma, Old Dollar Bill. And then at the end they bring up how like on the radio they were, because the radio sometimes is used a bit to kind of move stuff along too as far as exposition. And they talked about how her husband was like he had passed, but he was like some kind of not a money launderer, someone that steals money from a company.
Embezzling.
Thank you. Yes.
Great. Now you've set me up with A Christmas Carol starring Mrs. Deagle. Just
you
imagining
like it's a bad thing.
It's like a Muppets Christmas Carol, but like Gizmo is the ghost of Christmas past and Stripe is the ghost of Christmas present. Yeah. Coming to Disney Plus 2024. Little CGI Mrs. Deagle. Yeah.
Well, just the blasé nature of like anyone in command. And I guess, again, that was kind of an 80s thing, but the cops are like, even after they meet Gizmo, they're like, whatever, it's no big deal, ooh, we're being taken over by things. And then they go out driving and the deputy is like, can we go back now? I don't want to be out here.
The cops were idiots.
Yeah, that was the bit that got me, was when the cops turn up and they're like, yeah, monsters taking over the town, whatever. And then Billy like literally pulls Gizmo out and they go, oh, look at him, he's adorable. Anyway, you and your fairy tale made up monsters that you've literally just shown us need to go home. We'll be fine.
I kind of, I know it's fantasy, but nobody questioned Gizmo. Like even like the good characters, it's like they saw him and they didn't say, what is that? Because like if you saw that would be your first question, is like, what kind of an animal is that? Because it doesn't match anything you've ever seen. You can tell that there's an intelligence behind the eyes. It's not like a cat or a dog. It has a face that you can tell is thinking. That would be the first thing I would think. I was like, what is that? And nobody questioned it. It was like, they just, oh, that's cute. Like, oh, I want that for a pet. I want to get that for my boy.
I was going to say that's the next step of it as well, is the fact that not only do they not question that this completely alien creature that has never been documented, but it's the fact that even in the face of him clearly being an intelligent being, because he's able to speak, he's able to kind of act and interact.
Yes.
Even in the face of all of that, they still treat it like it's a dog or a cat. They're just like, oh, what's Gizmo doing? Oh, he's just writing his quantum physics paper. Give him some kibble.
And then they think it'll be a good idea to sell him. Like all the clones that pop out. I think that's a good idea to sell. It's like, you should be questioning why that happened. And if it happens to the next one, how fast is this population of creatures going to overtake the planet?
It's literally tribbles.
It kind of is.
In many ways, it's a good thing that they managed to get it back under control, because otherwise Gremlins 2 lets neuter Gizmo.
But how do you neuter that?
How do you do that? Because they reproduce by budding.
Exactly.
They just put him in like one of those yellow rain macs.
Just completely waterproof him. Just cover him in sealant and call it a day.
Gizmo gets laminated.
My question is, how do these things keep themselves clean? Because they can't get wet. So are they just perpetually terribly smelly?
Dry shampoo, weirdly enough.
Actually, there is a bit of a continuity thing in that, because in the scene in the bar, like near the end of the film, there's a bit where a gremlin gets a full like beer basically poured over it, and it doesn't multiply. So my guess is they have to shower with like Pabst Blue Ribbon or something. Yeah.
That's a different kind of a stink then.
Oh yeah. Ooh, that's back bar room right there.
Why does Gizmo smell of Heineken?
More of the Heine, less of the Ken.
8 out of 10 gremlins prefer showering in Heineken.
Oh, did you know that Gizmo kind of inspired Furby?
Yeah, I can see it.
I wondered about that, because I remember when Furby first came out, people were talking about it being like Gizmo. And then didn't they make a Gizmo Furby?
I would not be surprised, considering all the other abominations of Furbies that have come out in recent years. Holy crap.
Have you guys seen the Furby organ?
Yes.
Yes.
I've subscribed to that guy on YouTube. He makes all sorts of weird inventions. I loved the Furby. The Furby organ is the reason I subscribed. It's like, that was just so bizarre. I love his mind.
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you guys have Furbies as kids?
No.
I had a Furby. Well, I had 2 Furbies. One of them broke. I put it on some wet grass and it shorted it.
Oh no!
At least it didn't multiply.
Yeah,
the
no
worst part
doubt.
was, right, the worst part of it was terrifying. So I had this tiger striped Furby and I loved it to pieces and I thought it was the greatest thing on earth. And I put it on some wet grass in November and it shorted it. But when it shorted it, it was mid conversation and it stuck just making a pitch. So it was like talking and then it suddenly just went ee and stayed like that forever until you took the batteries out. Terrifying for a starter. It's this dead-eyed animal just screeching at a high pitch at you until you took the batteries out, and you had to get a screwdriver to take the batteries out. So, yeah. But then, I had a few Furbies in my day.
I have a Furby Funko Pop. It's probably the one you're talking about because it's a tiger striped Furby that my friend gave me. And when my family was over here for Thanksgiving, my nephew came into my room, picked it up and said, "Look at this owl."
I mean, one of the ones I always wanted and I could never find them because they were very low demand was Shelby's. I don't know if you remember those.
They were vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, they were sort of Furbies that had been crushed into a shell and they sort of popped open and just talked to you a bit and then the shell would close again. And it was very, very surreal.
I mean, God. Furbies are just surreal in and of themselves.
The 90s were weird.
80s and 90s were pretty damn strange.
Yeah.
We had a Furby that I think somebody gave one of my brothers. I feel like they said that it was to borrow, like they should give it back. But my suspicion is that their mom wanted us to take it away. Because that thing did get annoying after a while. I'm not sure whatever happened to that thing. I think our mom got sick of it.
Well, did you guys ever hear the story about the Furby that saved that one family from a fire? Like it woke up in the middle of the night, or it started talking in the middle of the night and it wouldn't shut up. And so everybody came downstairs and they realized the house is on fire. So the Furby effectively saved them.
I thought you were going to say it dialed 911.
I was just imagining a Furby going and fireman carrying everybody out of the house.
911, what's your emergency? What's your emergency? Yum. Wow, wee, wow. Okay, we're sending somebody over right away. Thank you for your call.
Sir, do you know you have an unregulated Furby in this establishment? Whoa, your house is on fire.
Hang on, unregulated. Are you implying the existence of a Furby immigration service?
Well, they got to come from someplace. There was an interesting thing that was brought up, because there's a lot of like the rules are kind of like, okay, like talking about the water thing, like how does that all work? Or are they just really stinky? One of the things that was brought up was, well, it's always midnight somewhere. So in the second Gremlins movie, they actually they don't make fun of those things, but they kind of make fun of them. Like they bring them up as being an odd rule.
Well, I always questioned that even when I was younger. It was like, why can't they eat after midnight? And why is it what's the cutoff? Like when does it become not after midnight so that they can eat again?
That's a good point.
I always would just assume it kind of goes by where you are, like that time zone. Like if you cross time zones, then you're kind of screwed. But
is it a 4-hour window? Is it a 6-hour window? Because at some point it's always after midnight, but when can they eat again?
Well, I just assumed it was like lunar cycles or something. So after midnight, the moon is in a particular place. And when the sun comes up, they can eat again, presumably. But
okay.
Yeah. Speaking of eat, sorry, I gave a boring answer then. That's sort of everybody went, yeah. And speaking of them eating after midnight, that disgusting chicken scene is.
Oh God.
Yeah, that was gross.
But it does give you insight into the characters, like the true
they
ones
really like chicken.
Oh yeah, they eat with their mouths open.
I mean, I know you're kind of joking, but it kind of does, because you get the juxtaposition between the ones who have now tricked him into getting them to eat after midnight, and Gizmo, who knows he's not supposed to and refuses. So in that way, it does give insight into the characters.
True, very true.
I would also add, and this is really, really random, but so you have the Corey Feldman kid in this. The only, and I guarantee you, the reason he was brought on is the reason that any kid has been brought on to any movie ever, to, hey, look, there's a kid like me. But did he serve any purpose outside of being adorable? And did Gizmo do it better?
It's a good question. I want to just check something very quickly. Just June. Can you just remember June 1984 for me, please?
June 1984.
Thank you.
I didn't exist, so I can't remember that.
We still love you.
Callers. Oh, yes. I don't want to rate Gremlins yet. I want to check something. Thank you. December. All right. Okay. So Corey Feldman would have been quite successful at this point because he had just come off filming Friday the 13th Part 4.
Oh, wow.
So we would have gone.
When did Goonies come out
this.
compared to this?
The Goonies.
Was that 82 or 86? I don't remember.
It was 85, so it was after 85. Gremlins.
Okay.
So what would have happened, presumably, because obviously they film Christmas films in summer, ready for a winter release, because they have to do the post and stuff, would have been he would have finished Part 4, been a bit of a hot commodity, and would have been snapped up to appear as tree deliverer in Gremlins.
That was a weird costume that they forced him to wear.
Oh my God, yes.
At first I thought he was in the tree that they were selling to people. It's like, how did that work? Are you selling them hollow trees? But then it's just like a tree is hauling another tree. The tree has betrayed its own kind.
Well, that was the way how they did that back in the 80s, so
They forced children to dress up as trees to sell more trees.
Yes, that's where the child labor issues of the 1980s came from. It started, basically there.
It was known as Pine's Law.
And you having a British accent could probably, make people believe that too.
I can get away with murder with this voice. I'm telling you now, it's the greatest gift I've ever been given.
Basically, yeah. So,
Gremlins. 1984. Got a PG-13 rating in America. In the UK, we didn't subscribe to that. When it came out over here with Ghostbusters, we just gave it a 15 and told the kids to go swivel. And they went home and cried and rented the VHS version and learnt about it 2 or 3 years after the fact.
Well, did you know that each one of those Gremlin models cost between $30,000 and $40,000 to make?
I had read somewhere about that. I seem to have read somewhere else as well that they had to do like periodic trunk checks of anybody going in or out of the shoot because they were worried people would steal them.
I wouldn't be surprised. I know that Red Letter Media has the hands or maybe the body of one of the original animatronics. Yes,
they wheel it out occasionally on the show and they sort of CG its eyes to blink.
As you know, they're not terrifying enough. They also, initially, they were trying to find other ways or other things that might work. So they actually put a spider monkey inside of a costume and it ended up destroying the studio.
Oh, you see, that's because they fed it after midnight. So.
If that's a real story, that sounds like something that you should have known in the beginning would be a bad idea.
Well, according to IMDb, which you kind of got to take what they say with a grain of salt if you can't back it up somewhere else. But the guy that initially designed, so it was his studio or his workshop that designed all the puppets. So his name is Chris Wallace, and they suggested using puppets instead of proposed stop motion. As a compromise, the studio suggested a spider monkey in a suit, which if the studio was saying it, basically, it's going to be a bad idea. Mm-hmm. But they tested the spider monkey in a suit in director Joe Dante's office. Animal went crazy, tearing the office apart and defecating everywhere. Dante screamed at the trainer to get the animal out and then asked Wallace, "So, puppets?"
I think they made the right call.
I'm sure there was a step missed there where they tried John Candy very briefly, but it didn't take. So they were like,
Well, it sounds like it would be a good parody.
John Candy is Gizmo.
Yeah, there you go.
Get Rodney Dangerfield in as well. The pair of them could have some kind of crazy Gremlins adventure. I'd watch that. Yeah, being a gremlin, you get no respect.
Well, that's what happens when you go around murdering people all over town.
Well, it doesn't help. But, they were still endearing. They knew how to enjoy a good movie at one point.
That's true. There were a lot of movies in this movie. I'd forgotten how many. Like, I probably don't even know what half of them were, but I know they were real.
I found it quite interesting that they managed to actually get the license for Snow White of all the films they could have licensed. I was
thinking that too.
You know, Disney are notoriously protective of their IP, so how they managed to swing that, I mean, I don't know, maybe Spielberg went and had a very, very kind word with them or something, but yeah, it was interesting, especially for Gremlins. Like, of all the films that Disney would go, yeah, okay, you can play Snow White in the middle of that film. The film where one of them gets put in a microwave and blown up is the is the one they were thumbs up. That's fine, you know.
The only thing I can think of is that this was in the 80s. This was when Disney was struggling financially. Maybe they were just desperate enough to take the money.
Very possibly.
Yeah. But it's interesting, like I say, that Spielberg had involvement in this, but at the same time was as hands-off as he was. I mean, there are interviews with him where there were a lot of things in the film that he wasn't keen on. Execs in particular had a lot of pushback on the reveal about what happened to Kate. Is it Kate's father?
Kate's father.
Yep.
Yeah. That scene, the studio execs really pushed on Joe Dante to cut that from the final run because they said it wasn't clear as to whether it was supposed to be a funny scene or a very, very upsetting scene. And they were concerned that it would, cause people to turn off and be sort of a bit confused. And Spielberg didn't like it either, but he argued on Dante's behalf to keep it in because Dante believed that it was integral to the film's general ethos. And they left it in the end. And I think it's probably one of the most powerful scenes in the film. It's certainly the one that sticks in my mind the most because that monologue is quite intense. And considering this is Gremlins, to have that scene be the thing that makes me go, oh, hang on, this is, you sure this is a kid's film?
Well, and it's funny because they do actually make light of that in the next movie.
Mm.
So were the main characters in the next movie? Because it's been too long. I don't remember who's in the next movie.
That's okay. So Billy and Kate are in it. Dick Miller, which he shows up in all of Dante's stuff, but he was in it. So he was the guy that played the kind of like American obsessed guy, the guy that's like, anti-commie and all that, which, wasn't all that.
He wanted everything being American made. He was afraid of anything foreign.
Exactly.
Yeah, the Kentucky plow guy.
Yep, exactly. Like the reason he said, oh, well, we should have bought a Zenith TV was because at that point it was one of the few TVs made in the States.
Mm-hmm.
But he plays a much bigger role in the next one. But yeah,
I'm
those
assuming
four...
a different character.
No, same character.
He didn't die. I thought he got hit by a snowplow, didn't he? And his wife get mowed over.
But it's Dick Miller. He always comes back. He's Dick Miller.
Okay. You're forgetting this is Looney Tunes rules. They basically just put their thumb in the mouth and blew into it and reinflated, and then they were good to go again.
Exactly.
I guess the only definitive body that we saw was the landlady, Mrs. Deagle.
Exactly.
We did also see that was another thing I was saying.
And the teacher.
How on earth?
Yeah,
the
my
teacher.
God, the teacher got like, oh man. That was a regular horror movie right there. I will also say that in mind, and I know this is a thing that we could say about a lot of movies now versus then, but I love the fact that you don't see the transformation right away. It is kept really well in shadow.
Mm.
Yeah, I thought that too.
Although I think that's from Spielberg's school of filmmaking in the sense that with Jaws in particular is a good example. You never see the full shark until the third act. Part of it was through practicality, but they always, they'd show like a bit of you might see a bit of an eye or a bit of a part of the shark moving in the water just silently in the background. You didn't actually see the whole thing. And I think that Dante probably had a bit of a discussion with him about how to present the Gremlins once they transformed, because a lot of Spielbergian practices are present in Gremlins as well. Like you say, you see maybe a bit of a claw, you see possibly a very quick sort of blink and you'll miss it shot of one of them running out of frame, or they try to mask it very well until that big boom reveal where it comes crashing through. Was it crash through a vent or crash through a cupboard door? I can't remember, but it's
cupboard door. He goes into a vent after that.
Yeah. But I think it's handled very, very well. And I think given that animatronics in 1984 were incredibly limited in what they were capable of doing, they really excelled themselves on the direction front and with the cinematography in showing the Gremlins to be way more animated than they probably had any right to be, given that it was 1984.
I thought that too. They were very realistic.
Yeah.
Like so much more realistic than I was expecting.
You definitely didn't, like, when you were watching them, you're just watching characters on a screen. It's not like, and not to say, I mean, CGI is CGI and it can be done well or it can be done like crap depending upon who's doing it. But there was no taking out of scene with that.
Yeah.
You know, you were in the scene with the Gremlins. There was no like, oh, I saw a string or, you know, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's Dante. I think he always, like, and Spielberg too, obviously. But I think that's just Joe Dante doing Joe Dante.
Did any of you guys pick up on the parallels between Stripe's demise at the end of the film and Christopher Lee's demise at the end of Horror of Dracula?
I didn't.
I haven't seen Horror of Dracula, so
it's been a hot minute since I've seen it. But
so at the end of Horror of Dracula, when Peter
is it the first one? The Horror of Dracula? Okay.
Yeah. The first one of the Hammer Dracula series. So at the end of that film, Peter Cushing is running around the castle fighting Christopher Lee's Dracula, and they're sort of having a back and forth. And Peter Cushing realizes that it's daylight, and he pulls the blinds down, and sunlight hits Dracula. And then there's this horrible sort of periodic transformation sequence for Christopher Lee's Dracula, where he slowly starts melting, basically, and it's almost beat for beat the same with Stripe at the end of Gremlins.
That's awesome.
The both of them, and they use similar kind of effects as well. Like you start seeing like the bones and bits of skin falling off, and it's very gruesome and over the top. But yeah, it pretty much mirrors how Christopher Lee's Dracula dies at the end of Dracula.
Nice. It's been forever since I've seen that one, but yeah, no, that's awesome.
That triptych of Hammer films are just amazing. Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, and The Mummy.
Oh yeah.
Are just chef's kiss.
Oh yeah.
Perfect.
Any of those Hammer era are just fantastic.
Absolutely. They balance a nice sort of decadence, and they're easy on the gore. I mean, for 50s, they were a little gory, but by modern sensibilities, they're a little bit easier on the gore, so they're a little bit more accessible if you're not that into it.
This is very, very random, but
for this part, oh come on, man, we don't allow random in here.
I feel like we're not doing it. We're obviously not talking about the movie in order, so I'm just going to randomly talk about this one scene, actually two scenes, because there was two things in this movie that I noticed that reminded me of childhood. Very random things. The first one was when the mom is making cookies, she's using a certain type of frosting that was the same frosting that my mom always got for birthday cakes. It's the very specific tube of Cake Mate frosting that she was using to squirt the icing on the cookies. Like, I haven't seen those in decades. I'm sure something like it exists. They've probably rebranded and the tubes look different, but it was the tubes that I remember from when I was a kid.
Nice.
Oh.
And then at the end, when they're going into the toy store, there's like all these stuffed animals all over the place. And there is a stuffed frog that we have that exact stuffed frog. I took a picture of it that I'm going to put in the podcast when I edit for proof. It doesn't have any eyes. The one in the movie has eyes. Ours has lost its eyes, but it's the exact same frog.
Nice.
This is a very random thing. I was watching, I was like, wait a minute, I recognize that frog.
I was going to say, should we take an opportunity to talk about the inventions of Rampelter?
I was actually just going to mention that. And the fact that Robbie the robot shows up for multiple scenes.
I was wondering about that robot because it looked familiar, and I know it's like an Easter egg in some of these 60s through 80s movies. Well, actually, no, because it's in other movies too. I think it's in Looney Tunes Back in Action.
I wouldn't be surprised. There's like a whole bunch of
robots in that one.
Robbie the Robot is from the 1960s series Lost in Space, or my other favorite film, My Friend Tobor, from 1958. He's a quite iconic little robot who has gone a long, long way in terms of pop culture. I reckon he probably turns up in modern productions and no one has any idea who he is, but it's just because he's that robot from The Simpsons.
Oh, absolutely. I do think it, like the people that know. The rest, but it's for those people.
Yeah, I recognize him, but I'm not familiar with why he is significant.
No, that's all good. He's just, that was like, he was in, like Dan said, he was in Lost in Space. He also appeared in a bunch of B movies out of that same era. And I think it was just like, okay, hey, we need a robot for this movie. What can we use? Oh, hey, we've got this one from this random TV show. Let's just pull that. So
I had a question about the robot because at one point he's talking in the background. And is he talking about that one movie that you covered on your channel, Stuff, the white stuff?
I'm trying to think when Stuff came out.
The Stuff was around this time. It was
1985. It came out in 85. So this would have precursed that.
I don't remember what exactly he said, but I was like, is he talking about that movie that she reviewed on her channel with the white goo?
That's a good way to describe the Stuff. That movie.
I am curious if there's any connect. I'm just going to look up the trivia on it here quick and see. So I'm not seeing anything on the Stuff compared to that. So I'm sure that there's a chance that I'm not 100% sure what to say on that, but yeah.
I'm pulling up the scene. I'm going to share the screen and just you can tell me if I'm crazy or not.
I don't think you're crazy. I mean,
we're all a little bit mad, aren't we?
The question is totally without meaning.
It's not showing you the picture.
Pardon me, sir. Stuff? Thick and heavy? Would 60 gallons be sufficient? I rarely use it myself, sir. It promotes rust.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's okay.
Well,
the reason is probably
you could hear what I was talking about.
Right. Yeah, and it brought up the subtitles. I mean, I would assume that too, but being it came out a year later, and I don't think from what I've seen, there's no crossover between people, but it probably was in production at that time, given the time of year that it came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure. I mean, Stuff could be, if you're talking Stuff, it could be like, drugs of some sort.
Well, he said thick and heavy, would 60 gallons be sufficient? And like, the Stuff was thick and heavy. There was way more than 60 gallons. That's why I thought he was talking about.
No, I think that makes great sense. I can't tell you for sure. Like I say, I couldn't find any connections, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist.
Maybe it was like what Pixar does.
From looking around, Joe, Dante, and Larry Cohen have a relationship.
Do they? Oh gosh, I missed that.
There was a documentary called King Cohen in 2017 where Joe Dante is a contributor, and there's a few posts on Joe Dante's Twitter about hanging with Larry Cohen. So I'm assuming that the pair, they've had DVD double features released together. There's been documentaries of them working together on various bits and pieces. A couple of photos actually on Google Images of them just sort of palling about. So, who knows? Maybe they did have a relationship. Larry would have certainly been working on the Stuff at this time. So I could absolutely believe maybe they would talking behind the scenes about what they were working on, and maybe Joe thought it'd be funny to slip something in as a little in reference possibly.
And this movie is definitely stuffed with not to mince words, but it's definitely mixed with a lot of other stuff.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, well, if they knew each other, then maybe it was like a Pixar situation when they're putting Easter eggs for a future movie in a current movie.
That'd be my guess, yeah.
But I know Stuff is probably one of those movies that's I'd never heard of it before I saw your video, so I'm assuming that it's obscure. So maybe nobody else has ever picked up on that Easter egg.
It could be.
If it is an Easter egg.
I mean, I think it's as good a chance as any.
I mean, I don't know what the overlap between Gremlins fans and the Stuff fans are, but I'm probably the sort of crossing point of that. And I'm sure there's a few of us around, so... But, yeah, I don't think it would have mainstream appeal.
Yeah, not so much, but I mean, both are. I mean, even Gremlins, for as popular as it is, I mean, I could see it, at least by modern standards, sort of being considered cult, just because of the way that it operates.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think as well, a lot of the history, a lot of the things that people think about Gremlins have kind of been absorbed into the cultural osmosis of the last 30 to 40 years as well, which I think has helped quite a lot to... Because, I mean, I having not seen the film all the way through until this watch that I did recently, I still knew a lot about Gremlins and a lot about how the film played out and a lot of the sort of references and bits, just purely because things like The Simpsons or, various other 90s sitcoms or TV shows had parodied elements of it over the years to the point that it had kind of become just part of the culture, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like
it's like Star Wars or anything else.
Yeah. Well, like I always remember that episode of The Simpsons, the Treehouse of Horror one, where they get an evil Krusty doll, and that entire bit where Homer gets the evil Krusty doll is literally almost shot for shot a remake of the intro to Gremlins, where they meet the Gremlin for the first time. They do all sorts of little references and nods to stuff like that. So I would certainly say it was definitely a cult film, even though it has a wider appeal than most cult films.
Yeah. It's not cult in the traditional sense, but it definitely has a zeitgeist to it, or a crowd of people that do love it for what it is.
Yeah, cult plus.
Yeah,
it's cult and a bit more.
Well, you talk about it being in the public consciousness. It basically has supplanted what Gremlins used to be, because Gremlins was something that like originated in World War II. It was like a myth between in the army. Like if something went wrong on an airplane, it was Gremlins. And like there's even a Disney cartoon about Gremlins doing stuff on airplanes. And I think it's in the Twilight Zone. And
hugely. It's actually you wanted some interesting stuff. So they came out, was it Nightmare at 30,000 feet? No, that's maybe. So there's a William Shatner Twilight Zone episode from the 60s. And then I think there was an 80s version of that. And then either there is an 80s version and the Twilight Zone movie, or it's just a Twilight Zone movie. That's Nightmare at 30,000 feet. And that movie has some advertising stuff in Gremlins. Like it's in the background on a poster.
Well, it makes me wonder, because Gremlins, like Disney had the Gremlins in at least one short, if not more. But they actually, for a while, had a Gremlins film in production. Like they were going to do a movie called Gremlins. It was going to be written by Roald Dahl. And it never happened. Like it was just, it probably was, today it would be called in development hell. It just never came to be and was eventually canceled. It kind of makes me wonder, if that movie had come to be, would this movie still be what it is? Because this movie like basically took over what the public thinks a gremlin is.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm looking at the trivia here. So I had forgotten this, but both Steven Spielberg and Joe Dante did segments of the Twilight Zone movie in '83.
Okay.
And they had a version of Nightmare at 30,000 feet, but it was directed by George Miller, who did Mad Max.
Right. Just go to Spielberg's house. It's just filled with Gremlins stuff. Just everything is Gremlins. Gremlins doorbell, Gremlins mat, Gremlins door, Gremlins windows, stained glass.
Gremlin.
Oh, hey, you know what? I have seen those stuffed gizmos that you can buy. The ones that are like film accurate, that are usually somewhere between $60 and $100. And I have been tempted in the last sort of 48 hours to pick one up just for how blooming adorable they are.
I kind of feel like I want one now.
Aww. I could make you a stained glass one if you like.
I don't know that I could give that a cuddle.
That's true. That would be a bit difficult.
Ow, 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 ow. So, Gremlins. 1984 film in America, got a PG-13 rating. First one to get a PG-13. They introduced that to sort of coincide, because the film had such graphic elements. And the UK didn't bother with that. They just shoved a 15 logo on and fired 3 children into the sun to appease the Queen.
I actually, it's funny, it came... Oh no, we lost John. Earthquake! Ah!
Burn but fair rules in the United Kingdom.
I'm just imagining like one of the royal guards loading children into a cannon and firing them into the sun, and the Queen is off to the side nodding approvingly.
Well, go on. Do it. For Queen and country! Or for King and country! You were going to talk about like the inventions, and I think they are definitely worth talking about, because damn.
The bathroom buddy.
Yes.
Which I actually think is not a bad invention. I would quite like some kind of pocket bathroom device that just was there, because the amount of motels I've been into where they miss key things like a mirror or, you always end up running short on shaving foam or stuff like that. It's useful.
You would want to carry around a thing that probably weighs 10 pounds in your back pocket when you could carry all your other stuff around and it would only weigh like 2.
I like the convenience.
Uh-huh. Because, if you're going to go shave and you've got this gigantic, like the size of a brick thing that it's attached to, oh yeah, that's going to make for, clearly you're not going to nick yourself shaving doing that. No, never.
I see no issues with the bathroom buddy, barring the fact that maybe the nail clippers would eject into my face whilst I was trying to shave.
I personally was a rather large fan of the orange juice thing. Like it's sitting there and it, stuff is coming out, and then they go back into the kitchen after everything explodes, and there's like 15 oranges worth of pulp all over the walls.
Yeah, there was a very disproportionate amount of juice and pulp explosion to orange that was put into the machine.
Yeah, a juicy orange.
I'll try and give you some highlights from my notes, and I'll just read them out as I wrote them, because I'd had a couple of whiskeys at this point, so I was writing more about my own sort of personal inner monologue. So I put, oh man, this is Hill Valley. That's the first note that I put in, because
actually it is, yeah.
Yeah, the Gremlins location was reused would be reused in Back to the Future as Hill Valley, which was quite good. I wrote in all caps, I want a Kentucky harvester. In caps immediately after that, Mrs. Deagle. Oh, I like her already.
One of her first scenes was threatening to murder a dog. You liked that?
I put, they're really terrible with the whole don't put him in lights rule, aren't they? Because like literally every 10 seconds, maybe they just did it on purpose. Maybe they were just like, turn the lights on more. Yeah.
I will say where, Gizmo goes, and then at the very end, he says bright light as he's pulling up the shades, and then it melts the crap out of Spot. Or for goodness sake, Stripe. Yeah, I know.
Again, all in caps. Oh, they're all huddled around playing Donkey Kong, and one of them has a little trumpet. That was quite cute.
There were so many good gags in the bar scene.
Oh, the 50s noir one, yeah. They had them in the little trench coat at the bar drinking whiskey and listening to sort of 50s jazz. And then somebody goes, well, I don't even know if it was a Casablanca reference, but it was fairly close if it was.
It might have been Casablanca, but there was another thing in there where Gizmo was in the car driving around, and that was based off a movie that he was watching earlier. So, and that kind of comes up in Gremlins too as well. But I didn't know if it was from which one it was from, but yeah, there was definitely stuff from that. So.
All caps again. They've taken his Kentucky plow. I don't know why I wrote just in very small letters, smoochy time. There's a literal chainsaw battle. Gizmo drives a car. Blimey. That was... and my final thoughts were, this is such an odd movie, a fun movie, a good movie, but it has no idea what it wants to be. I kind of like the chaotic messiness.
Yeah.
Oh, man. And it works. It definitely works.
It does. There were a few things. We mentioned Mrs. Deagle, her scene at the end, but there were a few things in her scene that I did want to talk about, because there was some great stuff in her final moments. We said her cat's name, those Kopek, Drachma, and Old Dollar Bill. I loved that.
Oh, that was hilarious.
And then the Gremlins outside singing Joy to the World for some reason. And she says, Christmas carolers. I hate Christmas carolers. Screechy voiced little glue sniffers. And that reminded me of there's a couple versions of A Christmas Carol with Scrooge, where Scrooge has Christmas carolers and he hates it. There's like an old silent one where there's just one little boy outside and he clonks him over the head with a big hardcover book. And that randomly reminded me of Scrooge. Like everything about her is very Scrooge-like, but that specifically reminded me. And then when the gremlins attack, she screams, "They're here! They've come for me! Oh, I'm not ready yet! I'm not ready!" So I'm like, does she think that these are demons coming to drag her to hell?
Quite possibly. So I was trying to think there was a thing, and I should have written it down, but I figured that we'd talk about it and I'd remember. But there was a thing with the school teacher, and I can't remember what it was, but just the way he said it, it was so funny to me.
There was a lot about the school teacher that was questionable. Like, why was he working at 2:30 a.m.?
Because that's what good science teachers do. I mean,
I don't think he was a good science teacher. He seemed very unethical.
He was working in a room full of Bunsen burners. Maybe that's what it was.
A brain sitting on the table. Just a random brain.
Okay, first off, it was the 80s. Secondly, first off, it was the 80s, and, they took real science back in the day. Secondly, what science teacher who worth their salt wouldn't have a brain randomly sitting on a desk?
Right next to his sandwich that he's eating.
What science teacher takes a look at a gremlin, a clearly advanced being who is able to communicate and show clear thought better than any animal in the animal kingdom to date, and goes, "Yeah, just shove it in a cage. I'll feed it a bit of chicken every so often, maybe some kibble." I just love the idea that this scientific authority, I mean, I could understand the town not really thinking that the gremlins were anything more than like a cat or a dog in terms of character. But you would think an academic who would clearly be able to kind of observe that would give them a bit more credence than just put him with the mice. We'll figure it out.
And the fact you got him just a candy bar. Hey, I got you a candy bar, and it's already like a half beaten.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you wanted a Baby Ruth or a millionaire bar, so I just got you. So I didn't get you either. I just got you some circus peanuts. Enjoy. Just sort of throw them at the cage.
Oh, that was the other thing. Like the little kid, took the money out the back, and it's just like, okay, well, I think your grandpa is going to notice that he's gone right away. And then showing up at the end to take poor Gizmo. I mean, the poor guy has been through hell. He gets traumatized beyond belief. And then it's like, well, we're going to take you back and leave you in a cage.
In a box, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
With no air holes.
Back to being ignored in the dark for you.
Exactly. And then it's like, well, screw you guys. You treat Gizmo the way that, you guys treat everything. You don't understand it. And then I'm going to take it away so you can't understand it. And I'll tell you, the abuse goes on, like in Gremlins 2, the poor thing, he's like a whipping boy.
Oh. Apparently the technical crew, because they got so annoyed with how Gizmo's animatronics worked, because apparently it used to break constantly, they got so annoyed with him that the crew wrote up a list of things they want to do to Gizmo. And the dartboard one was actually something they wanted to do with it. And Joe Dante was like, "Hey guys, look, I know you've had a rough time with this, so we will put that in the film." So somewhere out there is a very angry animatronic puppeteer who is who has a lot of knives to grind.
Well, I guess we've kind of talked about the end in various chunks throughout this whole thing.
And it's up to you, dear listener, to figure out how the ending happened.
Hopefully they watched the movie before they listened to this, but if they didn't, then they're probably going to go in fresh anyways, because we were all over the place.
Yes, we were. Oh, so this is where the kids were melted into the sun. Okay, I got it now.
I love the idea of somebody who's never seen Gremlins sitting down to watch this to get a good idea of what Gremlins is. The main takeaway is just one person in the comments going, "The Brits had it so hard, a 15 certificate, can't believe it."
Don't even know what a 15 certificate is, but it sounds painful.
Well, it's on par with being shot into the sun as a child, so yeah, it's not great.
Does anyone have any final thoughts about Gremlins?
Gremlins good.
I for a first time watch, I really enjoyed it, and now I know tonally what to expect when I go for the rewatch. I think I'll enjoy it even more because now I'll know when to watch it when I'm in the right headspace for a film like this. I thought it had really gorgeous direction and cinematography. I thought the lighting was amazing, and the fact that they kept on brand with blues, whites, and oranges throughout as part of a color scale, I thought was a really nice touch. The soundtrack was demented, not my cup of tea.
Oh, I forgot to even mention the music.
Mm.
The music was great.
Yeah, it's really, really solid, just crazy synth work that I very much I enjoyed within the context of this film. It wouldn't be something that I would just stick on in the background, but yeah, it worked for this film perfectly. Just a tonally all over the place script, but overall, I think it's a really good, solid work that I enjoyed, and I look forward to probably catching it again next Christmas.
On top of that, very well thought out, straightforward, on some last words on this. I'd say it's just a ton of fun. I love looking at all the little Easter eggs, with addition of the stuff one that I didn't hear previously, like just all that stuff from the 80s that you just don't see or you don't think about, but that meant enough to Joe Dante to add in there, which I love. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it had been years since I'd last seen this. I'd forgotten most of it. I didn't know what to expect. I expected to enjoy some of it. I figured there'd be stuff that I would be kind of met on, but I had fun through this whole thing. I watched it like in the middle of the night because we had company and I hadn't had a chance to watch it before then. And I thought I was going to be falling asleep through the whole thing. And I was not. I was totally engaged. And every time I had to pause to write more notes, I was excited to push play again. And I can't always say that, especially on movies that we have covered in the past. This was a lot more fun than The Asylum's War of the Worlds.
That's not saying much, if we're being honest. I'm just saying.
Yes. And I didn't think that this was going to be on that level, but it was so much more fun than I thought it was going to be. I expected to like parts of it, and I think I liked the entire thing. It was just fun all the way through. Ridiculous, over the top, Looney Tunes scale fun. I loved the movie.
I would also say that it's nice to know now how much of a distance you can get on an old bag, like flying out a window via a chairlift thing. You get decent distance, given wind resistance and everything. It's good to know, kind of the range.
You'd be surprised to hear that this is the second film I've seen in a 2-week window where an old woman on a stair escalator gets blasted out of the top floor of her house by a malfunctioning chair.
What was the first one?
It was a film called Tales from the Third Dimension, which was an 80s anthology movie that is, frankly, again, perfectly demented in every single way, shape, or form. This one was caused by Santa just hitting the chair with some magic because she was a nasty lady who picked on the kids in the house. So Santa gave them some presents and then blew their aunt clean out the window and into space. And the film's in full on YouTube, so enjoy that one if you want to see. If you're into your old ladies getting punted.
I mean, yeah, who isn't?
Well,
I hope to be that old lady someday getting punted.
Because you think this was a conversation that Spielberg and Dante had in their office? We got to get in on the old lady punting market. Very lucrative market.
We have to launch the elderly out of window.
Hi, my name's Dan. I'm here as a representative on the Launch the Elderly campaign. We could do with some funding. We're hoping to secure several high-velocity cannons. The aim is to launch them either as far as we can get them, ideally to the sun. Have you ever been to England? The Queen does that regularly. Well, she did that regularly, not anymore. This is a very surreal podcast. Jonathan, do you do this regularly?
Not to this degree. Well, I think that's probably a good place as any to end this one.
Sounds like a plan.
Do you guys want to let people know where they can find you if they want more from you?
Yeah, sure. And I just want to say as well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I know it's been a little crazy, but I like to think we've all grown together as people.
I think I've grown a little bit.
You can find me over on my YouTube channel, TYTD Reviews. We upload new videos weekly. We're currently doing our Christmas specials. We've got a lovely animated film called Santa's Pocket Watch coming up in the next couple of weeks. And next Friday, we're doing a collaborative event special for the movie Winter Beast, which is a odd 1992 stop motion film about two mountain climbers who end up fighting Native American demons near a lodge. It's very Twin Peaks. It's very odd. Also should mention that, Jonathan, you yourself have appeared in a collaboration with us for the film The Giant Claw, which was great fun. Really enjoyed talking about that bird the size of a battleship. And I'm also on Twitter. You can reach me at TYTD Reviews there, and do drop by and say hi, because I'm always up to talk about movies and just hang and get weird. So
oh, come on, it's crazy. You can find me on YouTube at Trivial Theater. I do a wide array of random, obscure, and straight up bad movies. Right now, I'm not sure what's coming up. I'm sure there'll be something, but at the moment, I don't have anything specific. Probably a few Christmas things. I do have collabs for Future War and The Neverending Story Part 2, which will be coming out at some point this month. I'm just not 100% sure when. You can also find me on Twitter at Trivial Theater.
And you'll be able to find her on this podcast this month a couple of times.
Oh, yeah. That's how I roll. I think I have my own playlist, actually.
Yes. I have a playlist on my channel of all of our collaborations. And it's getting kind of long, so you have plenty to listen to. Okay, well, thanks for joining me for this episode. Maybe in the future we can have you both back to talk about Gremlins 2.
Ah,
yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Christmas Movie Marathon on iHeart Movies. If you like what you've heard, don't forget to subscribe on whatever platform you prefer, and of course, make sure to follow my co-hosts as well. Any relevant links will be in the description for easy access, and we'll see you soon for another brand new episode. Thanks for listening, and Merry Christmas!